hear the good information from Jessica later. You know,
Yeah.
it'll be saved on our YouTube.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but
And then there's the one on Sunday, which I won't be at.
Yeah.
Because of lovely play, but
right.
because we go down tomorrow.
Gonna be so good.
I know it's gonna be wild, and
Where are you
Sandy's going with us. Isn't that nice?
They're going to the Godly Play.
Coronado.
You're going here?
The Godly Play training at Coronado first. Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be good.
Yes, the Charlotte.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good.
She's very excited. She and I were drilling for the copiers. Like she said, she announced the staff meeting yesterday. She's like, well, I need to use the copier tomorrow. And I tried to get everything printed last night, but there was just, I couldn't get everything done in time. I just couldn't. So I was like, okay, I'll come in and try and find time. And she's like, well, I have like 15 things queued up. I'm like, all right.
Oh my god.
Yeah. She's awesome.
Yeah, I love her. I do too. Okay.
It's over here.
Thank you.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, thank you so much. Sorry, do you want to shout it?
No,
I say up here. Yeah, you're gonna need to. That was a might be
all right. I have one more thing. I'm getting used to laying through again, and I can be ready.
Yeah, no, take your time. I'm gonna eat my salad. So this feasibility study cost money, right?
Mhm.
So the diocese is already invested in this property.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, that's part of what we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not like, that's not a surprise.
no, I know. I just was thinking like with the feasibility study done, we can go and get some RFPs from developers. That's the next step.
We probably want to get an appraisal.
Okay.
And part of the reason I wait to get an appraisal is because then I can be like, what's the vacant land value and what the land value, would probably be for a developer at X number of units or up to X number of units.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see that big lot over there? That's the lot, the 20-acre lot.
I know.
And the sign of it?
Oh, I didn't see, is there a sign?
Yeah, it says for sale.
Oh, did it go? I wonder if it's still there. I don't know. It fell through?
I don't know. But that's the same sign that's been there this whole time.
Oh, well, maybe not.
And then Jessica, I was driving around and right by the high school, right down the street, there's a 40-acre lot for sale. I mean, this is gonna go and get developed.
And you know about the new homes that Lennar's building?
Yeah.
I hate our store over there.
Oh,
There's 200.
wow.
It's huge.
Wow.
It's developed.
Oh, yeah, I saw a sign for Lennar.
Yeah.
But they're like single-family
There's
homes,
600 homes.
for-profit developer.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
But it's needed. That.
Hi, Laura. I was saying, oh, so she didn't get to eat today?
There's
I'm right. Oh, I just ate. Oh, I didn't. I'm not eating it.
Right. Last one.
And I checked it out.
I'm up here.
No, I was already, I got received, James, if I needed to. I didn't think I could explain what I wanted. So it's better to leave me by myself.
Should I read these lessons? The had a picture. Are we gonna be brainstorming anymore?
We can keep the stickers up on sticky notes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll look at that.
I get you received a little sticky note.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. How are you?
Such a good conversation. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Just great. But you know, those tremors, and
Yeah.
I hear that, and that's right from the beginning, even when I was right as the other day. And it's like you, and I'm trying to be respectful. He made sense.
Yes.
I thought it was very, I thought it was very, very
It was
productive.
such a good
But
meeting.
then later it was like, it just.
No, I was trained too, and I felt my heart open in the meeting, and then I said, hearing what he was saying.
And then able to have those conversations.
Anybody want a bit of it?
Yes. Because
They're like my favorite. All right, I will be right back. Okay.
How is it supposed to be included for non understood? And I did get thinking, there needs to be lessons. And that idea will have separate space or non, but
Here?
Yeah.
it's, hey, it is related to. Welcome back.
Sit down there.
Celebrations and everything. Oh, yeah, 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 graduations and everything. Yeah. Guys is,
No, I mean, I got
probably not. Lloyd. Liz is. It's good to be back on the same point, in the same state.
And in the same state?
And in a same state.
Back to be in and a.
I don't know how saying this. But we know, oh, but no.
Charmaine
Fix it.
Yeah, so me too.
Good job, honey. Oh, goodness.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Down. Did you teach today?
I would work today, so. Charmaine's got an appointment for the.
I teach seniors and they're done.
Oh,
yeah.
Graduation tomorrow, but.
Oh, so they're.
So I don't have any classes that I'm working on.
And she called
Like the math placement stuff.
They
for
had
next year.
canceled her appointment.
So wow, it just seems like every year it's summer is, the school year ends earlier and earlier and.
Yeah.
I remember starting in September, like mid-September.
Yeah, we get exactly 2 months for the summer. We're done with meetings.
Oh, yeah.
No.
That-
Okay, so just the seniors are.
I just wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, just the seniors finished for the last week.
Everybody's.
Happened. So.
I'm good.
And it's classes except for covering. So, like, departmental stuff.
I know. I'm sure.
How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thanks for coming all the way up to.
No worries. Happy to be here. It's way sunnier than warmer here than it was in San Diego today.
That's for sure.
I was like,
Yeah, 6:32.
Well, to St. Mary in the Valley Episcopal Church, wherever you are and wherever you find yourself in the journey and heights, you're most welcome to participate in this meeting about affordable housing. I'm so glad you're all here. There is food in the kitchen. If you would like, you can go get some. It's like salad and sandwiches and stuff. And we are very honored to have Jessica Ricker here, expert from the Bishop's Office about affordable housing. She has a very impressive resume. Has worked for 35 years in housing.
no, in a whole variety of nonprofits.
And she's been instrumental in getting our feasibility study done and just guiding us along the way. So, how would you like to start? Would you like to, should I turn it over to you? Oh, let's start with prayer. We should start with prayer and then it's from the Bible.
Good.
Okay, yeah, tell me.
We're good.
Alright, the Lord be with you.
So with you.
Oh God, thank you for St. Mary's. Thank you for this beautiful place, this spiritual home, a community of love and faith. Help us to be fully present here tonight, to let go of whatever we were dealing with before, and not to think about what comes after, but just to be here and to listen and to give our hearts to this, because we are seeking your will for this property, for your church, and for St. Mary's presence in Ramona, not only now, but far into the future. Please help us to listen with open hearts and minds and be open to the moving of your spirit. In Christ's name, amen.
And
Welcome, Scott. Thanks for coming. I was just saying there's food in the kitchen if you're hungry.
Just me.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about why we're here tonight. Sure.
Okay. I'm gonna do this because my brain is a little fuzzy again. Yeah, so I hope just bear with me if I stand here with my computer and everything.
All day.
Do you want to be on the,
God, that's too formal for me. I don't do that well. Thank you. I use it somewhat. I actually use this to drop my computer, but okay. So basically, you all
been working, I don't think I need to tell you, you've all been working for a really long time, we're figuring out what you want the future to be. And you know who you are in terms of being an actively engaged, I think you've used small but mighty or which is entirely true. You know, be boxing and punching above your weight or something, I don't know. Anyway, but part of why we're here is because you're looking at a variety of different things. You're looking at how do we advance our ministries of church, like, among ourselves. How do we respond to community need, right? In terms of mission real estate, this is the bishop's call. And then how can we, use our land to ensure that and ensure our financial sustainability. So really, those are the three things that we're here to talk about tonight. And so we kind of set this up as like, I don't know, a series of conversations, maybe, is a good way to put it. And I just did some kind of background legwork. I think I was telling you, Jen, before we came in, that, I put up some data and stuff. Basically, I think you all did a survey in terms of your like your comfort level of understanding where your finances are, thinking about where you are in terms of what you need to achieve your vision for the church and, to build your ministry as a church here. And then also to be thinking about, so like there's a whole bunch of data and questions over there. There are also some really important questions around sacred spaces. Do you have sacred spaces that you need to protect? So for example, in some of our sites, this is not one of them, so I'm not going to try and panic anybody. That there are some places where it's like, oh, we could or should, for a variety of reasons, bring the church into a full exchange. So, like in your case, the sacred space would be this space, right? So, like, just to be able to name those space, if you've got, if there's some other sacred spaces, you want people to recognize. And I think that's a really important thing. And then you can have conversations about like, okay, is it absolutely 100% sacred, or is it we really like it to maintain it, but maybe not, right? So those are some things to think about, and then also to be thinking about like, how do you envision for whatever you do? I know you're looking at housing as one of your main options. But for whatever you do, how are you going to be in relationship to the actual, the development of it? It's like, it's not, you can build something and have no relationship. But the whole idea is that you want to find synergy in what you do so that it feeds the church and you feed the project and that you're trying to build on itself. So those are some things there. The other thing about that is I pulled some data just about like, I think there were questions about like, who would this serve, right? And so I pulled some data about like, who's living in Ramona now, just in terms of how is the population changing. So that's some information from Mission Insight. I think we looked at it all, maybe a year or two ago. I built the most recent data there. And the last set of questions is really around like the different options in the project. So basically the whole idea is to walk through this conversation in a way that you can think through like, oh, how do we make sure that we're hitting all of our terms? Does that make sense? And it feels really weird to be talking to you all so quickly. I'm hoping that we can do this and get up and walk around a little bit. I'm going to be way more fun that way. But so ultimately, that's really what we're here to do. And I have way heavier than I remember. So, basically, I think the first thing that we want to talk about is kind of like where the financial picture is, and like kind of thinking about what do we need. And like before I get started, I'm going to ask you to refresh my name. There's something that I know all of you, and so I'm trying not to do that again. So I'm just going to go around first. Laura,
Scott.
Pam, Jen, Belinda. Thank you. Sorry, my brain is sick. So is that okay if we get up and like walk around and I'm gonna hand everybody like sticky notes, we have sticky notes, and we have a pen, and we can put sticky notes on things and talk through them. Hannah's gonna play whatever game show. Zoom to
I'm videography.
So, you can always come back and grab them if you want to.
Popped in on the meeting with,
Yes, I
and it was like talk about finance stuff, so I thought, yeah, Kathy was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you.
Anybody else?
It was good.
That's all. I like them. Him and his partners.
Yeah, they're awesome. So we can just walk around and look at the slides? Okay.
And did you want to?
It's a good place to start.
Yeah, yeah, so I kind of did it, so we're kind of going around
In a circle?
and then going back that way.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Yeah, it's really cool.
So, understanding financial needs, I guess, anything in here surprising? I wasn't planning on spending a whole lot of time here, but if you have questions.
Where did you get the numbers?
We,
From us? From us.
Okay.
From our survey.
Yep.
Okay.
yeah, this is what we
And they
said.
very well.
Yeah.
Nice.
We had a lot of members of our bishops committee that responded.
Okay.
So I think that might be why.
Okay.
Also, people that have been here a long time
Yeah.
responded.
Yeah.
So
I like this. This one's important. Understanding that we do need to do
Yes.
something,
Yes.
in order to sustain ourselves. Yeah.
And I think what, there were about 25 total responses, I
Yeah.
think is what I remember.
Yeah.
So pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Like half.
Yeah.
but see, there's some people are very concerned about long-term sustainability. Some are somewhat concerned, but nobody's not concerned.
Someone to probably maybe,
Yeah.
but that could be.
That was Carol Wiesenberger.
Yeah.
That's not really the kind of-
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then, so if you have questions about that, here, I'll come to you.
So if they have questions, should they write them on their sticky and put them on there? Okay. If there's anything you want.
So some of these things, I just put up some numbers so that you kind of just had a sense, like, this isn't like, oh my gosh, we have to be exactly this. But it was just to give a sense of like where you are membership wise versus the median membership in an Episcopal church in the US. There's just, I pull from the National Parochial Report. Same thing with average Sunday attendance for churches of a certain size, because if you're looking at, just so that you can think about like what it's gonna take to grow, because, yes, whatever you do here is part of it. But once again, these things should feed each other. So,
Yeah.
I want it to be real, I'm trying to be as realistic as possible. I also think though that there are some questions that you could, if you look at this data, you can ask yourselves about like, would these things still be true as we grow, right? Like from where you are now or where you were in 2024 to like what you would need kind of. And that was a projection. And I'll go through that in a minute. Let me put this. So basically, I did this whole like random calculation. Random probably isn't the best word, but thinking about the things that you all were saying that you needed to support your ministry, right? And then saying, okay, because trying to figure out all of this is, I don't want to say like it's hard, but I also didn't want to make too many assumptions. I also didn't want to like go crazy on the budget piece of it because I'm not here with you every day, so I wanted to be fair. And also recognizing some of these things will take time, right? A little bit of time. So if you look at your current resources against future need, so basically what I did is I kind of took like, assuming for a full-time rector based on compensation and pension and all those things, you probably need about an additional $75,000, salary, benefits, healthcare, et cetera, those kinds of things. And then, like at least $25,000 for other priorities. So I was kind of looking at like these other things that would be important, and thinking about like, what would a part-time paraprofessional come help teach Sunday school? So it didn't have to be all volunteer or, and you can look at that and it could be anything from like $10,000 a year to $20,000 a year or more, right? So thinking about what you might need there and then all the other things that you would want to build in over time. So the current future need is basically what I did is I just took the income now, looked at the income that you would need for that full-time rector plus $25,000 to get to this, right? And then I looked at like a series of data based on like your pledge and plate is currently 65% of your total income. Which means that if you were to just continue to go at that pace, right? You need $158,000 from
your pledge and plate on an annual basis, which is
In order to afford this.
in order to get to this minimum
Okay.
future need.
Okay.
And then right now, you've got a really high percentage of pledges on your pledge and plate, like 92% of your pledge and plate is pledges. That tends to diminish as you grow bigger, just as a thing. So like, this might not be completely accurate, but 92% would be at this 145 mark. Then what I did, because your average annual pledge over the past, like 2020 to 2025, I think that it might be 2024. I can't remember, sorry. I might be 1 year off.
Oh, one thing, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'm $1 off here, but at any rate, that ultimately what I did is I kept it the same because like one of the other things that we know is, people who've been with the church longer, who've been longer time members tend to pledge at a higher rate.
Yeah.
Especially people who are established, and then a lot of newer families tend to pledge at a slightly lower rate. Cost of housing, still paying for kids to go through school, all those fun things. And there are probably a whole host of other reasons. I'm just kind of throwing it out there as food for thought. But ultimately, if you kept that average the same, plus I also factored in the economy being a little, people being uncertain. So if you divide it, if you kept that the same and you divide, right now you've got 29 people supporting this, or you did in 2024, you would need about 54 people to make that happen.
54 pledgers. Pledging at this average.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the important thing to know is that last year, your average, like last year alone, your average pledge was closer to $3,000. So but I averaged it over 5 years because like a 1 year number is kind of
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
But also the last 5 years were a little, weird. Anyway, in every church.
Yeah.
I didn't want anybody to think it's just them. So, and then I was looking at, okay, so your average Sunday attendance, what would that mean? You're in the number of active members, what would that mean? So just to really help think about like what you need in terms of resources. And then this is to kind of give you an idea of like where you were 2020 to 2024. And then for these two, they only had it through 2023. I didn't pull the full one. So I just pulled from online, 2023 for both the the San Diego diocese and the church as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're below both where the diocese is and where the Episcopal church is, but not too far below.
No, and if you look at your last year at 20, yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, and I think, but like to think about like, if you're, as in order, you want to grow regardless of what you do over here. So some of it's a balance of like, what are we going to do to grow and how much is this going to, how much
Impact
is what
that.
we do here
Mhm.
into try and keep that tension and balance. So those are some things to think about. So based on what we know today, thinking about like, how do you see pledging based on your experience at this church changing in the next few years? Do you see that being a thing? The other thing to think about too, aging members.
That's.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to talk about it, especially because we're all going to be there one day or another.
Yeah.
And how might you expect the expenses to change as the church grows? Because like some of your expenses stay more static, some of them grow, there's a word I'm looking for that I can't find. Some of them grow faster. It's like, yeah. Thank you. And then like thinking about like, how do you need to think about what St. Mary's minimum future need is, and then the role that Mission Real Estate can play. So that's a lot, but this is like a time for me to shut up and you can have a conversation. Or ask questions.
So my question is more or less has to do with the actual process, starting with the county. And so we do all this work. Are we sure that we will be able to be approved if we use housing, put housing on this property?
So you by right are able to develop housing because there's a state law that allows you to do that, but it's not really up
to the county to be quite, I mean, like, there are limits, you know, like, you have to follow within a certain set of rules. But ultimately, like, state law allows for churches to build housing on faith-based land, and they allow churches to build housing plus community use, so things like the resource hub you're talking about, you know, preschool, health, whatever, you know, thinking about like what it is that you can do uniquely. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure that probably some of the regulations have been adjusted and modified because of the housing
Mhm.
situation.
Yes, yes. I mean, a lot of the, you know, I mean, people fall on all different sides of the coin here in terms of how they feel about this. But because we're in such a crisis, because there's so little housing and because there's so little affordable housing, the state really has made a lot of attempts to allow for affordable housing in new and different places. And you know, one of the things is that part of the reason that churches became one of those places is because churches often, if you think about it, have served that kind of role. And, you know, now it's an opportunity, you know, and it kind of, there's some synergy and like churches are looking, have land and are looking for things to do. We're in a very lucky place here that we don't have a lot of churches that are like closing down and folding, but that's not true in other parts of the country. So,
I got you.
yeah. Others?
This may be over there on some of the data, but looking at the average pledge, how is that relative to the average income here versus, let's say, in San Diego? For our church, what's the average income, or not the church, but the community here versus the San Diego?
I didn't compare, I mean, that's why I put the diocese of San Diego, and you've got to figure you're kind of somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Like income wise, the data over there is showing you that that Ramona's growing. Or you've got more people who are at the top end, you know, growing at the top end of the income spectrum. But you're losing people in that middle band, like in that like $55,000 a year band, but they tend to be your people who are your paraprofessionals. So like your frontline health workers, you know, your aides, your preschool teachers, you know, people who are, you know, like retail workers, things like that. So, I mean, I recognize every business is different, but if you look at what you're growing this way, but you're losing you're losing a population that actually works in your downtown business.
Yeah.
So like, what are some of your other, like, what are your other things you would expect to change? And I mean, feel free, if you have thoughts about how you would see this changing. Like, for example, like, is this something you think we can sustain? Do you do it, you know, like, you know, it's like, I do this as like you flip the switch today and did tomorrow, but like, nobody's gonna do that. Like, so
That means that if we're doing that we have to count on however many, 93 active members in the future all the time. That means we have to count on that number. We don't have income from affordable housing, so or whatever. But
93 or 54 pledges.
yeah,
So I assume.
And ideally you want to do a combination of both, but like, I mean, and I think the thing, I guess the way I've been thinking about this with a lot of churches, and this might be helpful, is that like, just doing it is really hard because you don't have those resources right now to catalyze that growth. And so like, if you think about the opportunity to use your land as your catalyst for growth, that it puts less strain on the existing members of the small but mighty congregation you are to actually, you know, and it gives you some breathing room to make that leap and begin to move in that direction. And then it becomes easier. Like it's you know, it's like that virtuous cycle. It becomes easier to sustain.
I think one of the questions is, if we don't do this,
on this land, what more are we going to do with it? It's just gonna sit there? Seems kind of silly when we have something that could make us money. When we need, right? Yeah, something needs, yes, yes.
So, and I think the other thing that's important to note is all of these things together. Like if you have a part-time youth minister, all of a sudden you're probably gonna get more families, and then you're gonna get a half-time youth minister, and you know, like, I mean, 'cause there is a piece here where, you know, like, what do you need to do to build a 3-6 month operating reserve so that, like, you know, you're not pulling from, pulling from other funds and stuff. I mean, it's just like, those are the kinds of things just to be thinking about, and that's like where that attention is. That you can either, I think we were talking, you can either be like, okay, there's do nothing, do something that feels safe. Maybe go a little outside of the comfort zone and see what's possible. You know, I mean, and it's a continuum.
So where does the funding come from in order to build build on the property?
So the way we've been doing, the way that we're doing projects right now, all the ones we're talking about are all revenues. So basically what that means is you have a developer, I mean, are other folks familiar with the development process? I don't want to assume yes or no.
No.
Okay, that's fine, no big deal. So basically, the developer rents your land and the right to build on it.
Okay,
Of course, we don't just go, here, write a check, build whatever you want.
right.
We say, build something that's mission aligned, build something that's gonna make sense, build something that, we can have a relationship with, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna be like over there every day, but like, how do you do this in a relationship so that you are growing together in community? So the developer, so basically, we would put down, part of what this conversation is, we would put down some parameters around like, okay, here are the things that we'd like to see. Here are the things that, are must-haves. Here are some things that are nice to have, And so you still might get developer comes back and so gives you something that you never thought of, and you might like it. And you might find other things and go, I thought I was something like that, not so much, right? So like, there's a little bit of a dance in this process. It's not like, because we're not going out and saying, okay, you decide you're gonna do this, and the diocese writes a check and says, build it tomorrow, exactly to these specs. It's much more like, you agree to say, we're gonna do something. We're gonna do, we can agree to do this much, or we can agree to, or here's at least how we want it to feel in the end, is a good way to get about it. And then like have a little flexibility, because quite frankly, until you sign something, you're not obligated. So there are a lot of different ways to go about getting proposals or estimates, things like that. So you can get information without making a firm commitment. So
No,
did that help answer your question? Did you have a follow-up question? Okay.
So going back to developers, is that something the diocese that does all of vetting and choosing? How do we give our input into that? Because really, we're gonna be the ones right next door, and you're talking about building, and it wasn't been mentioned that it was a little bit like a marriage, it's a long-term relationship. So how do we, get our input into it?
Great.
It's like notion for message and research developers before the diocese does.
So, I mean, you can. I will say we've done a pretty good, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the developers who do affordable housing locally. And depending on what you want to do, there are different groups that are kind of a better match. I mean, if you have suggestions, totally open to hearing that. But generally we do that, but you would be looking at the proposals, and we're not making a decision for you. We'd be identifying developers who we know are mission aligned, who have a good reputation, who, that's.
And we would look at the list of whatever.
Yes.
We would look at everything, and would we make the final decision, or it was a joint, or?
We'd probably do some kind of, collaboration on it, and I say that because, it's just, we're doing it on a regular basis. Yeah, but just so you know, we also have an attorney who specializes in affordable housing. So, like, we're trying to do things so that, like, to minimize the work on the church part, but
you are welcome to be a part.
Experience and connections.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we fit into that
Yeah,
decision?
yeah. And so like, you know, for St. Luke's started a little bit before, like I came on board, before we had this whole thing going. How many of you participated in the conversation today? Okay, just, it's okay. I didn't either, so I just happened. And for those who don't know, I literally live, like, I live here. I see the project being built in front of my house, like, every day. So I know what's happening. I'm really confident they're building it.
Here, is St. Luke's the first affordable housing in the diocese of San Diego?
It's not the first affordable housing in the diocese, it's the first all affordable housing. So the cathedral does have some affordable.
I mean, like at a parish site, at a church site.
Well, like the cathedral built like that huge tower,
Right.
and it has some housing, it has some affordable housing in it.
Okay.
It's an entirely different program.
Okay.
But it's not the first, but
Okay.
it's definitely, so it's
More than
first
this
is
time. Okay.
Yeah, start to have. And some, Scott,
That's it.
oh, yeah.
The developer, what is the long-term agreement? Is it a 30-year agreement?
Well, I mean, that's.
Like,
55 to 99 years.
land leases?
It's a 55 to 99-year ground lease typically. That's because that's what the state of California requires for these types of projects typically. Because most, you're getting public dollars coming in to fund the projects, in most cases. You're getting, once you're getting, the project is getting, ye fragment. Because all you're getting is the developer pays you to lease the land. And like, that's the easiest way to remember it. So they're handling all the construction, they're handling all the property management, they're handling any services that are provided on something, which is why it is very important to pick a good developer.
Yeah. When they're not doing the job. It's like, that's a strategy.
Yes. So that's why we have. Right.
Okay.
And not just anything, but because so basically, like risk, like we have some things in there for risk mitigation. So for starters, in many ways, actually, some people argue this, it is actually helpful to have some of the state or local government investment because they have far more obligations to get the money back and a little bit more leverage than just the average person, right? So in some ways, having a certain amount tied there is not a bad thing, right? So there's generally like the developer has a lender, they'll have some like, they might have equity in themselves. They have a lender, they have investors in the project that buy, typically they're tax credit projects, so people, investors buy tax credits, tax write-off, to fund the project, yeah. And then, their city or county or whatever dollars often in that mix, they're generally different funding sources when artists gets really complicated, which is why we don't really want to do ourselves. That is, so it does not go, like, so that is kind of involved on the developer side, we're not involved in, yes.
So we don't know how they get their money. They're just gonna, they have their money, they're gonna.
Yeah.
So
But they're gonna get nice numbers. Yes.
Right.
Anyway, going back to the legal question, let me go back
Yes.
to that for a quick second. So going back to the legal question, basically, the things that we do is we make sure that if something happens with the project, that we don't lose the land. We make sure that like we retain, so basically what we did, you probably heard from Colin or St. Luke's, held the money, we're holding the money in trust, like principal, and have a payout every year.
Yeah.
On that.
And it's been down.
It can be, it doesn't have to. So like, I'll call it a quasi, it's basically money that is set aside not to be touched. So that if you did need to go back in, put dollars back in, you would have leverage to go back. Is that helpful?
And we get our percentage of whatever the revenue brought in is, and what's the process for rent increases over time? What's the formula?
So, the formula depends on, it will depend to some degree on the project.
for how they do rental uses and all of that is governed by like government.
But if it goes up, we still get our, like, flat, I mean, flat now.
Right, like you should, you would get an escalator as the road, as that, the endowment goes, right? So you should be pulling with like 4.5% off a year, that kind of thing, something. Is that how?
Yeah, what is that percentage?
First thing, it's like $100,000 a year and then on the road, you know, incrementally. And generally, so there are two ways it can be done. One, you do the principal and then like put the principal aside and you get the money every year. And generally drawing down less than what it earns, so it's continuing to earn, so you can continue to have that escalator that keep going along with the project. The other way we do it, which we did not do because we needed to sign, you know, like leave, I'm not forgetting the term, but like a leave the state saying that we are kind of like solar project. You know, we're not gonna go sell the land, you had to sign. So basically for that, the other option would have been, we get, you know, X thousand dollars this year, and then it is, you know, 3% return per year increasing.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
are we responsible for any maintenance, not maintenance on a daily basis type stuff, but like improvements or none of that? Okay, there's not a provider.
You get money because you lease the land. That's it.
And with St. Luke's Colin was saying that at the end of 100 years, if they own whatever is on that property, on the property, you have that.
And we also have standards in for like maintenance, you know, it has to be maintained to like a certain standard, yeah, to certain standards.
Just this, sorry, this is off topic, but what?
I realize we got into that, but that's fine. I don't care what direction we go on. I think it's actually, that's my son. So I don't, because you'd be bad trying, yeah, okay.
That, I can ask my question later, it's not me.
Did we have some questions, like, did we have finance questions? All right, so.
I do have one question about sharing the resources that are potentially being built over there. So obviously housing, we're not have anything to do with, but if there's a community center or something like that, do we pay ourselves for using it? I mean,
Oh, so how does that work? Okay, so, good question. So I was thinking about the housing, so I'm glad you asked that question, because that changes my answer to Scott's question, kind of fit it. All right, this is like, I said, I can't keep them all in my head. So, basically, there are a couple different ways to do that. One would be that the developer builds it, the developer owns it, that the community resource hub, the developer gets, you know, and then you have an agreement, like, you know, first in long-term lease, low cost to rent, like that space, a portion of that space.
if the church,
And you would use some of your proceeds from the ground lease sale,
Right.
from the ground lease to do that. The other thing is you can do it like people did, which is you get a condo interest in the development. Then in that case, you would have some maintenance things you could be responsible for, or you could outsource these to the developer for an agreed upon fee with escalation, blah, 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 blah. Those are a couple different ways.
So
Or actually, or the third option would be there's an entity in town that wants to rent that space, like in my in town, I mean, locally, regionally, who wants to use that space as like a main office or main building, you would still have your space in there, but they would be the ones responsible for it. Could be another way to keep it structured.
Are you saying that we can negotiate just about, like, say you wanted a condo for a rent? That's, we can have it as like,
So when I was talking about condo, I was talking about condo fee or like a condo as an administrative space treated like a condo. Yes, you can also do that.
St. Luke's, a lot of floors.
Correct.
And I was wondering if we want to do a resource center, like how does that look? Yeah, that's what you, a different option.
Yeah. And so some of
Maybe
it
a separate building.
yeah,
yeah.
Which is for resource. So it's not part of that. I
Mhm.
don't know if that's an option. Is that an option?
But
If we wanted to do a separate resource center just for ads, for admin, for.
I mean, you can, I mean, I think there's, I mean, I think some of it depends, like, you can ask for anything, right? Whether you get it or not,
Right.
is another thing,
Right.
okay. So, and then you can say, our preference would be,
Mm-hmm.
or we would be more interested in proposals that did X, or Y. You know, those that like, but what I would always encourage is, once again, your goal here is to get the highest value for the land in a way that is still mission aligned.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Because you don't want like, I mean, cause like, some people go, oh, we could just sell them. Right, but then you control nothing about who your neighbors are, what they do, right? So like, there are trade-offs, right? So I think that, so what I would say is as flexible as you can be. Because, you know, and as long as like, when I'm putting out an RFP or an expression, you know, asking people for expressions of interest is the other way to do it. As long as I'm saying, the church is still really trying to discern X, or there are some things that they have questions about. We don't really know until we know what's, you know, the offer might look like. You know, what do you see as possible? What do you see as the range? Now, the one challenge with that, I will say, is opposed to going straight to a proposal, can be that like circumstances change. Like, we have tariffs today, we might not tomorrow, who knows about 3 weeks from now. I'm just using it as an example because it was in the news and it does have effect everybody. It does have a food cost.
It's two Fridays, twice, maybe even 3 times.
So I mean, like, so, you know, like, the less buttoned up you are, the less firm it is, true of any contract, right? However, if you still need a little discernment, we can figure that.
Is there anything that we can get, like, okay, you're gonna have a certain amount coming from leasing land. Is when you have this amount of money is being placed in some kind of trust
Mhm.
as a baseline and we get interest from it.
Mhm.
Is there anything, because what I'm hearing is we're just gonna have to deal with some money, but we're not gonna be able to do anything on these current facilities until we get that money. Because that's not gonna be part of the project.
Mhm. So some,
That's a totally separate thing, right?
so the way St. Luke's did their project was they had an option agreement at first, which actually basically, a. I mean, are people familiar with option agreements or not? Okay, I just want to be like, I don't want to be, you know, condescending or anything. But like, basically, we sold to a developer the right to explore whether or not they wanted to build on the property. And so they paid an upfront fee that was part of the overall total. You know, so like, you don't get more, it's just like they factor that into their costs up front. So like St. Luke's got 2 payments of, I think, $30,000 each to like, you know, so like that was like, and then when the deal closed, they got an additional amount and then they'll start to get it. You're right. Is that helpful? So like, there are different ways to structure them. Sometimes, like, you know, you can do it in a way that it, like, a lot of it gets paid up front. You can pay over time, like, you can do the, you know, it's like,
Well, I'm just thinking that
Yeah.
this facility needs work
Mhm.
itself.
Yeah.
And
Coming from diocese.
it sounds like it's coming from this project. That's it. That's what it is. Which means it's foreign.
There's somebody else some money available to help. They want to help us restock though. I just got an email, you know.
That's the kind of thing.
Yeah. We asked for a lot more stuff, but they said we can probably do that. And then you get your mark fixed, but it's the thing like, I heard you saying before in a previous conversation was that we could, get rid of our modular and maybe some of these storage sheds, and we could build a beautiful facility administrative center that we have a portion of. That's what I'm saying. And you said something about how like you can either have them build it all out completely, or you can have them just put in the studs and the drywall and then we build it out. You know, it depends how much control we want over the finished product.
Correct.
So there's all kinds of options.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's a whole other project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to think about though, is it's not necessarily like, you know, I'm gonna hand you a hammer, I'm gonna hand you a saw, or, you know, any of us, I'm just, you know. But more that like, sometimes like the developer can build that in. I mean, there's a cost to some of it.
Sure.
Because you're saying instead of you getting the revenue off of it, we want to have freedom of it, we want to get the revenue off of it. But you can often get people to build certain things in. I mean, it just really depends. Like, it also depends on developers. It also depends on whether or not you're doing it in a way you might be able to share space, like there's a whole, but I know it sounds like it depends, but the reality is, it's like, there's a lot of options. And some of it really comes down to like, what do you need? What are the things you absolutely need? What are the things that you want, but could, you know, negotiate on this out? And then like, what are the things that are just like, okay, this project is not going to be a unicorn, I know, like. Yeah, you know,
And who's negotiating that, the attorneys?
yeah, so basically, the way we work for St. Luke's, is, you know, we have our attorney for, you know, that we use for development. We also have diocesan, like chancellors and stuff, like there are a couple of different layers of review in that whole process, you know, and lots of eyes. And then the other piece of it is, you know, and then it really starts with, I'll go through the contract first and be like, okay, so like here are the things on the flag, and then, you know, just, and some of that is just like cost saving, I think, to be fair, because I'm not an attorney, but like I know what I want to look for in a contract, so, and then I'm like, is there anything else?
On the St. Luke's property, the lower level is gonna be commercial. Is that what I heard?
Correct.
Okay, so that commercial property is gonna be leased to people in the community?
Yes, so St. Luke's actually had an option, different kind of option, you know, to say, we want to use that space for something, will, you know, and they were gonna rent it back, potentially say we could give to a business incubator. And they decided they weren't ready for that, so gave some of that up to another, to others, like further. But I'm not, so did I answer your question? Because I felt like there was a question that I missed.
So what common fishing is that it will probably be rented out to like a restaurant.
Right, right, a corporate should be. Yeah, I was just, I was wondering.
But we can still use that space to be a talk about possibility of having just a center, is there more? Military, they can rent that space.
We have a lot of military.
Well, there's a woman, but they have to go down the Penton or down the rear mark to get. There's a lot of inspiration. Because we're around. On all those things, but so it could be like, you know, restaurant, whatever. I like the idea at the time, driving to, you know, our mission, but we're trying to do resource center.
And I would actually think with the St. Luke's piece is very different. Because because that's like truly like commercial space.
Yeah.
Yours would specifically be for like non-profit space, which actually change, where there are different laws for how those things go. The commercial space actually has taxes attached to it, that are then attached to the developer, on location.
You have to have a certain approval from the planning then, if it's commercial.
So not for non-profit use.
Yeah.
But if you did truly commercial, I don't even know you would, you know, because I don't know that it falls within SB4 the same way. But like, that doesn't mean it couldn't be like, it depends on what you're thinking about as commercial. So like, if you like daycare commercial, okay, it could, you know, depends, that would probably fit in. Certain, like, there are certain things you can do and certain things you can't under this law, but like to do a restaurant, probably not, unless it is attached to a nonprofit business incubator connection.
Restaurant.
Exactly. Is that, like, so it's different, Like, it's not, but I think there are some limitations on exactly what you can do. I don't know all of them, so I'm happy to get back to you, but I don't want to speak out to. My memory.
Put this in chat, chief, we can ask you.
Or, sure, you can.
Yes.
So we're talking about.
For that, so,
Should we do this stuff? Yeah. So, quick question, that's it, so if, because the diocese decided to leave the nonprofit development or for-profit, because of those, are those different rules and regulations?
So you can have a for-profit developer that does nonprofit housing. Yes, just don't.
Okay.
And then you can have a nonprofit developer who does nonprofit housing. And then you can have for-profit developers that do for-profit houses. SB4 requires the housing be affordable. So in some ways you've wiped out the for-profit developer from that mix. You can still do or you can wipe out the for-profit. You can do the for-profit developer who does nonprofit.
Okay, that's what St. Luke's does, right? They were
But they
for-profit,
just,
they did not-
use the law that.
because that was before it was.
And because the city of San Diego is different.
Uh-huh, and we're in
They're-
Ramona.
Yeah.
Gotcha. We're a different beast.
Everyone, yeah.
Jessica, what's the congregation that's ahead of us in this process, but that hasn't broken ground yet? Is it San Marcos or?
So St. Stephen's in Menifee,
Oh,
we have an expression of interest out that church there's no active congregation.
right.
That is actually, we're using that as an opportunity to replant a congregation.
Oh, great.
Great. Real plant.
And they're doing affordable housing out there?
That is what we are putting on the table.
Okay.
I'm in the process of.
Who else? Who else? There's other people. Remember that Mission Real Estate Task Force meeting that, like 2 years ago? There were all these churches there and I feel like they were,
Oh, because some of them got new rectors and, like they're different, like not everybody moved. It's.
I guess what I'm asking is where does St. Mary's fall?
In the first five.
First 5?
Yes.
Okay.
And the faster you move up the list.
I just want to win. I just want to win. That's all.
That's all
Moving and efficiently fast.
Okay, there you go. All right, sacred spaces.
This is the sacred space. I think the labyrinth is.
I'm gonna ask people to put stuff up here. Is there, like, if
Okay.
sticky notes up here? I don't want to trust that with them.
Figure out how to spell library.
I know, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I just searched right here. You can just circle it.
I'm just putting. It's a heart.
There we go.
You got it.
Okay, we got John Haven.
So, like the obvious, those two. Got to go. Yes. But this will be affected by it.
Yeah, the courtyard out here,
Yeah.
the green space.
And if it's helpful, I did draw this because this is where your church is now. This is space that would probably be the space that we would use some.
I would say anything not green is sacred.
Anything not green is sacred, that's fine.
I mean, if it would impact potentially changing something in the future. Like,
Yeah, right, yeah.
well, no.
Okay, so we finished that one.
Mhm.
The next one.
Go rest. Wait, she wasn't ready for the next one. Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, got another question. What, I forgot. Dang it. It was on.
Okay, sorry, go back.
No, increase. Membership. If they rent, they have to come to church here. I guess we have fun public, right? They give them 10. I'm glad we got that.
How can they worry about people encroaching?
In terms of what?
on this space?
Building.
Is that why
I mean, what if they come to us and they say, no, we want.
I didn't get that said.
Want it to look like a concrete off. I mean, they're not.
Wait, I mean, you said the diocese, what is probably done?
Develop.
If we don't know.
No, I mean, this, like, this, yeah, yeah. I mean, basically,
I
I wouldn't say you have to be like.
Stop, just, that's for it.
There's a piece about like, you know, but they're, you know, so it's almost like understanding why she's sort of. Right? I want myself.
Just a question on why are we worried about sacred spaces? The way I think about it, pretty much anything to the left of this line here would be this church. We don't want people coming over here necessarily using this for regular parking unless they're coming in to church, right? So I mean, why are we, I don't understand the sacred spaces. Are they at risk in the future or? Oh, okay.
No, so the reason I put it there is because sometimes you find out weird things when you don't ask that question, you find it out too late.
Oh.
Or like, you know, because all of a sudden you go take a congregational vote and the person who never showed up, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, my whole family was buried on this one tree or whatever, you know, like. I'm not saying that's true.
That's fine.
I'm saying churches are a lot of places, I don't understand it.
Yeah, okay,
I don't think about the palm trees, but I like the other big trees. I'd be sad if some of these big trees came down. Yeah.
I mean, so that's just, it's like, and is it like, oh my gosh, it's not a private for it, it's like, oh, no, I mean, I'm not saying you have to, right? Or is it like, oh, we really like to hear it, then can you?
Yes.
And I'm so, oh,
What is the sun that's gonna look at this?
Yeah.
so they're.
Right, I see it, and it sounds nice.
But I'm just thinking, this would some nonprofit resource fund, you know, like maybe it'd be.
Mhm. But it also should be built in with the rest.
Okay, yeah, okay.
build it all.
You would?
Yeah. I would.
Can I give you a counter? So one of the things that you do want to be careful about, if you do want to create that relationship, and I'm not saying like how you do that and what that looks like is important, because if the message is, please don't come over here, we're an entirely separate entity.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, but I hear what you're saying, I'm just saying like, there are definitely ways to think about that.
No, I'm just thinking about it from a sound standpoint.
Mhm.
Because if you have 70 units over there, you've got a lot of people
Mhm.
coming, living,
On a second
eating,
story, yeah.
all that stuff. It's great,
That's true.
but it will be loud.
Mhm, maybe, yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah,
how about-
not a wall to keep people necessarily out, but it's. And there will be people in there who are not necessarily. They could be coming to her.
No, I'm totally, but I'm saying like, I do like encourage people to think about that, because like, how you design things definitely changes the message that you send.
Right.
And just like to be, and I'm not saying you have to do it one way or another, I'm just saying, if you build something with barriers, you very clearly send a message, well, we really are not that deal with you people. So, but the thing is you can ask for creative solutions around how do we help to ensure that the project was oriented in a way that the sound didn't necessarily. You know, like, I mean, those are the kinds of things that, like, those are the kinds of things that like, how, like, that you can ask, right? And it doesn't mean you can't build a wall. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah. We don't want to wall them off and make them think that we don't want to have anything to do with them.
Right.
Got enough of that. No, I'm not going there.
But that is, there'll be a lot of people there. There'll be a lot of cars, there'll be a lot of noise, there will be a lot, and like I was saying here, as far as the parking lot, again, not that we don't want them to come over here, but I don't think we want them all parking over here on a daily basis.
Right.
Which
Right.
will happen.
Unless we build in parking on the lower
Well-
level or something.
Oh, yeah.
Parking is part of the.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Parking is part of the. So why don't we do that when we get to the parking?
Okay.
So I hear you. I mean, and like, I think there's.
It all sounds great. Everybody, oh, we're gonna have all these neighbors, that's awesome,
Mhm.
but you just want to prevent it.
Yep.
It's a problem.
Totally.
Right. I'm also going to say one thing, because I mean, I realize everybody says 70 units, 70 units, 70 units. Okay. The feasibility study says up to with the community resource hub. You may get a developer who says 50. Changes the calculus, maybe.
And that's why I'm saying you don't automatically go so low, because then you can lose the value of your property. Right? They're, you know, like, it's just, it's a strategic balance, is really what I'm saying. But I do want to be mindful that we're saying up to, because that's very different than it is going to be.
Well, and what is that? Okay, are these numbers here or what we're projecting based on 70, based on 50,
So-
based on, or anything?
Taxed at the moment,
Okay.
I'm really honest, because until we kind of have a sense of what the congregation is willing to do, because that number of units thing is such a big factor. Or can be a big factor, I should say. That, you know, it's hard to say, well, this is what you would get, because if you go, oh, it's this, and then the market's piece, and right now, the market's pretty volatile, so like, trying to adjust that out is a little bit harder, so like, I think it's helpful to know. We become comfortable with exploring this, right? Give us the, you know, min-max, right? We can go back and do an expression of interest. Try and sort that up a little bit more, and then come back to closer numbers. Because so that those numbers are high, it's just more like,
That was fine.
yeah, but if you, but the thing is like,
Pledges.
Yeah, that's fine.
No. Like,
Well,
honestly, I'm one who's skeptical of putting 70 over there. I think if we want to be good neighbors and still move forward and have affordable housing, I'm having trouble with picturing what a 70-unit structure would look like.
okay,
And so that's what I was, one of the things I was hoping to get was kind of like, what are the range of possible incomes? Like,
At 50 units.
right, yeah, as we got some of the permutations of options based on unit numbers.
What's the greatest amount of income impacting?
right,
you know, a certain amount of people?
yeah. I mean, like I said, some of it is just like trying to run all those different things without knowing where you are, this way on.
That's what I think, we want to have active farming, we don't want to have people around here, that's one thing. So it's just,
They're required to do that all the time.
And I think, and that was the thing that Colin said, our next thing is to start looking at developers and was it RFPs and everything, because they'll come back to us and we'll see, oh, with this many units, this is what will generate, this is what it will look like. Looking at, the developers are going to be the ones getting us this information.
So there are two things that can be helpful. One is if I have a sense of the number of units that you're willing to do, we can, you know, we can start to look at getting an appraisal, which will tell you how much the land is worth at up to X number of units. So then you can get that. That's easier to, that's relatively easy to do, doesn't require a whole lot of fuss. The second, you know, this one second, sorry. The second piece is, the other thing that I'm doing, one of the places looking at like massive studies. And a massive study is really kind of like how something might be more like what are some different permutations of what something is. So that you can actually see it and picture it. Not like it's blue and it's got these beautiful windows and the arches and whatever, but like literally like a looks, which, you know, just like a sense of like what the scale is. So that can be helpful, and it can be helpful, especially for orientation, like the orientation of things, because I think orientation matters just as much as like some of the other pieces, like how is it situated? Like, is the building backing up to you right here, and you're like, ooh, right? Or buildings maybe. Is it, you've got a kind of between you? Like, there are lots of different ways that to go.
So obviously,
I mean, I just like,
the massive study, that I think would be very helpful because
okay,
I'm just struggling to figure out what it would look like. Sure. Just knowing what some of the buildings around town look like and knowing roughly how many units, 70, I can't, that's visualize, that's fair.
How many acres is this?
2.5.
And we said max 3 stories. 3 stories.
Say max.
Yeah. Can we switch?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, did you get this?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So if it can be, that's.
Yeah, I mean, basically what it means is you've got about 20. It's, I think it's over here on one of these things. That's why I was saying, let's go this way. Thank you all for playing along. This is about how we get this lesson too.
General questions, how much time? Request that they don't, this. People here
For what?
to make this happen.
Make the decision,
And,
communicate it. Meetings.
A lot of BC meetings.
I'm just wondering,
Like, you know, probably being a champion in the community would probably be a big one, you know, and figuring out the right timing for that is a really important thing. You don't, like, right now, in some ways you don't have enough information to do that. And you wanna have the right amount of information, plus you have a sense of what you can get from it, because if all of a sudden you start going out and, you know, like, saying, this is what we're gonna do, but you don't really actually know whether somebody's gonna do it for you. Then all of a sudden, you've like gone out there, had this conversation, then they may not do the reality, so like, in some ways, it's better to get some like expressions, different proposals, something like that, and then you have a conversation before you sign.
Too bad Rob Llewellyn disappeared, huh? But they're out of town, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
But-
he's only know.
that's why I'm recording this, so, yeah.
Hi, Rob. Hi, Deborah.
So this is just to kind of give people a sense, because I think some of you, I can't remember. Some of you were part of a conversation, and I don't think that these questions were from you, but like kind of like how is the city and town changing in terms of what needs are? So like the age of the population is changing. You've got like, oh, you know, you've got people, more older people in the community. Some of that's because the community's aging, but you're also, you know, you're losing population here. The population is decreasing in terms of percentages. Here you've got household incomes are changing. You can see you're getting a lot more households here at this, you know, at the top end of the market, and you're losing families, you know, at your lowest end of the income spectrum, but you're also losing families at a 3.5% rate over 5 years in that $100,000 to $150,000 bracket. You know, those are your first time home buyers and stuff in many cases.
The people that work in the restaurants here, the people
Right.
who service our card.
Mhm. Well, the interesting thing is, and this is interesting, so this is households writ large, this is family incomes, but they're different in the sense that like, this is like a household can be one person. This is like, there's like multiple people attached to this. And so if you look here, you're losing people, you know, you've got a decreasing population at 15,000 to 50,000 $50,000 a year, and you're growing at $150,000 a year or more. So it's like, even that, there's some differences there, but this is where I'm noticing that like you're in a position where like, if it's not already, it's becoming harder for your grocery store. So, and to have people who can work there,
That's
and
fair.
they're traveling further probably. I mean, that's what I would estimate, but you can get from that data. Sorry. go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, if those bottom two continue to grow, you're going to see the average pledge probably go up, but
Maybe, yeah.
there's nothing on that.
If they come here.
That's why I said maybe. Hmm.
Go from 51 to maybe 70 people.
And then if you look at jobs, I'm gonna slide this way so that I'm not like, my belly's not in front of the camera. That seems a little weird for everybody. What types of jobs do people have? So I mean, this is the other, like, I was just kind of looking, because like, so this is like a comparative. So green means you have comparatively higher number of folks than the rest of the state of California who have some college or a high school diploma, but not, and you know, not a degree, like an associate or bachelor's or grad degree.
Our education, school district's the largest employer up here.
It's true in a lot of cases, in a lot of places.
Right.
Yeah.
Now.
And then, so I was saying this, and then here,
part of the other thing I was looking at in terms of like how the family and household incomes are changing, you know, you're comparatively, you've got more people who work in building maintenance, including more people who work in construction, more people who work in farming, fishing and forestry, surprise, surprise. More people who work in food prep, you know, I mean, between being an outdoors oriented and moving toward the mountains community and the tourism, you know, that's not surprising. And personal care, which is, you know, like your home health aides and hair, you know, that kind of thing. Or no, actually, I'm sorry, that's healthcare support, apologies. So like some of the other personal care type things. So then you've got high numbers, you've got higher than the state average in those categories. Many of those categories tend to be on the lower end of the income spectrum and fewer in healthcare, managerial, executive, office admin, et cetera. So to the degree, you know, so then you think about the housing jobs mismatched to some degree.
Is it true that we get more money if we do more units? There's more money available to us.
Yes.
If we do more than 68, is that correct?
It's not, no, it's not like a
It's not
specific
like that.
number. It's more that like your land has more value. If your land has more value to a developer, if you say, I could, because they're looking for economies of scale in building. So the more, so they can spread the cost across more units, right? I mean, it is affordable housing or not, it's still, you know, a business.
I just want to let you know you have about 45 minutes left.
We're good. Actually, you were. I'm kidding. Anyway, and so then the income qualifications for affordable homes. I put this up here because for folks who, especially if you've lived in your home a long time or you own your own home, like some of these numbers can be surprising. Have you all come over and looked at it? I could take it off the wall, but I think I'm not going to. I'll just knock things over. But basically, in San Diego County now, as of April, in your low income categories, right now, the median income in the county of San Diego is $130,800. It's considered median income, 100% of area median income, which is like basically right at the middle. So the county has set income limits. So if you were a family of one person at 30% of the area median income earning, which is about $7,150, which is what a lot of preschool teachers make. That's just like, that's my easy number because I've looked at a lot of preschool teacher salaries that, you know, that's where that is, right?
Teacher aides in school district.
Exactly.
Because they're part-time.
Yes. So like if that's for one person, then for a family of four, 49,600 is considered extremely low income. But if you go all the way here, so the highest end of the low income bracket, and I'm not gonna bother to look at, I mean, I shouldn't say bother, but like, I'm not gonna look at the 5, 6, or 7, 8 unit family size, in part because you wouldn't be able to get much more than 5, and so I won't look at 6, 7, 8 in the unit size that's being proposed. So, because like there's like restrictions on how many people can be in a unit, like you can't just have as many.
How many can be in the unit?
So like if you have a 3-bedroom unit, you can have 5,
Okay.
because you can have a couple.
What are we talking about? I thought we were talking about, what's a single?
So that's over there. I'm looking. You've got great questions. I'm just saying, like, I mean, so basically, if you were looking at like 80% of area median income for a family of 5 here is $143,000 a year. And I feel like if, you know, like I will say I own my own home. I haven't owned it that long, but I bought it before it got, well, long enough before it skyrocketed. Like I could not afford to buy my home today, right? I think they're probably right in that position.
Yeah.
And so if you think about who's trying to come in and rent, who doesn't already have a home, and you can't count on somebody to buy one for them, like that's, I mean, I think it gets really, you know, I've noticed in my own church and conversations, people just don't understand how hard it really is, because what it takes to do that these now, as opposed to 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago is really different.
Yeah, the new homes going up behind Kmart. Start at $754,000. That's basic.
Yeah, so I mean, but that's why, that's why that's.
These uses are, the gyms gotta be rentals, they're not purchases, right?
Yeah.
Quick on the, or maybe I'm missing this, family of 4,
Mhm.
30% is 49,000, and what does that mean? Like for,
It's what they earn. If they're earning, so they qualify for, you qualify for affordable housing as a family of 4 in the extremely low income category. Because the way affordable housing works is when they designate, when they build the units, they generally build like at a range. So like St. Luke's, for example, has units from 30 to 70% of area median income. And then they have a certain amount of studios that are allocated, and a certain amount of 1-bedrooms that are allocated, a certain amount of 2-bedrooms that are allocated. And that way you're getting a mix of incomes, you know, you're still, I mean, you know, you're getting some mix of incomes, and you're like, and it gives variability so that like, you're not only building for one population of people. And it also helps balance, because like the subsidy that's required to do this is so extreme, that it's helpful to balance it a little bit higher from a development standpoint.
that subsidy comes from the state.
Federal, state,
Federal side.
variety.
Okay.
Do you now know more than you ever thought you'd want to?
A little less.
Yeah. Well, okay, then I feel like I'm at least doing my job.
Yes, yes.
Did you have, like, are there thoughts or questions about that? So I put that up there just in terms of thinking about who you want, who you know, like what you understand about the community, who you need to serve, like are there things that like you should be thinking about as you make your decision?
Yeah, if we said, okay, all of these units are going to be for extremely low income, that will impact the percentage of revenue we get, right? Okay.
So that's why they have the different categories, right?
Right.
Less they.
Typically,
And where are
lower.
where are we thinking, or have we even had that conversation? Like, we want to have affordable income, so we're only doing here and here.
I was thinking like someone like me could buy one of these, or not, I could rent one of these, you know, and I would fall in the, if it were just me without Kathy, I make 44,000 a year here at St. Mary's, so that's probably extremely low income, I don't know, but.
You know, you're one, no, you're. Yeah, so you're still in that, you're probably in the
Extremely
40%, you're probably in a 40, you know, like 30,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know.
I petition, we just have one carved out as like a.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Thing.
Yeah,
To do what?
to have a rectory carved out.
So that actually does. You can make
That's a
that
great
part of the
idea.
request as part of the.
Yeah.
Database.
And because
Live
then,
here.
yeah, or whoever's the
Kathy
priest,
buy.
or whoever's the priest will have a,
Right.
you'll have a spot for them.
Well, we think in terms of you being here forever.
Thank you. I like that.
Yeah. Where church, or we have a priest, or you have a rector.
Yeah, they do.
Is acting as kind of leader of the congregation, they have a place to live.
Almost. And yes, that's part of the law. That's part of the law that allows churches to benefit. You can have up to 5% of, you can have up to 5% clergy and staff housing. It does still have to be deed restricted. The good thing is housing pay combinations generally fall somewhere in there, so it works.
Nice. Yep,
Okay?
yep. That's cool.
Okay.
We like that idea.
You know, and the other piece of it is, you know, that's a thing that the diocese is also looking to do. We are looking to figure out how to do more clergy housing. So, I mean, and like, I'm not gonna make a commitment for the diocese or the bishop. I'm just saying we are trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
So there is a piece where, you know, based on where you're located, does that make sense? If you're willing to do it, there may be some options for how that could work. So I'm just putting that out there. It is a good thing to think about, because I think, as you all know, it's very hard to hire clergy without a rector.
in our lovely.
Well, good ones anyway. Just kidding.
Right.
I mean, it's hard to get people to move here because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
Unless they have other reasons or a spouse who has a job that can support that. All right. So I'm gonna use this up to. Just saying. All these would be a ground lease. This was one I think you all came up with more on your own, so I didn't put a lot in here. I just was making some notes. But like basically, this was an original, like up to like the original proposals we got, or not proposals, but like feasibility. I'm sorry, I don't always use the right language. Said you could do like a mix of 1 to 3 bedrooms at 30 to 60% area median income. So you could have that range, you'd have that range of incomes is what they calculated it on. Your ground floor would be approximately 25,000 square feet, which is about a third of the square footage of those 2.5 acres, right? Maybe a little less. The community room of approximately 1,700 square feet would be built in there. 3-story wood frame, universal design principles. So, just like friendly design. You've got, I think there's some worry about green space. So the thing is that like, because they're different parcels, there's going to be some required setback, like, between the two things. And so like, there's going to be green space still. It's not going to completely disappear. How it's configured, it's, but there's already the setback. Plus there is some land left for additional green space in either of the scenarios. The feasibility study was done on a 3-story wood frame, which is how they got to the number of units, the maximum feasibility. And the reason they did that is so that you would know, because even though in Ramona, the code allows you to build 2 stories up, the state law allows you to go 1 story more, because you were giving a benefit to the state by using your land for affordable housing.
Okay.
So that's the reason for that, is that like recognizing they want to make it easier for churches to say yes, for developers to build, for people to live there. So they're like flexible, asking places to be flexible on the zoning code.
You have a level that has parking, does that count as one of the levels or no? Or you could do 3 above a level?
So I think the parking here is like a side-by-side, not underneath or anything. So you're not looking at a level of,
Side by side.
Oh, it won't go underneath.
there won't, I don't think.
Oh.
So it's too bad. It's much more expensive.
Yeah, oh, I know, but it would be.
It'd be prettier.
Then we have to regular this, right?
Well,
Earthquake.
25,000 square feet is kind of base, so
Mhm.
75,000-ish in total living square footage, is that right?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
I'm just assuming we're just doing 3 floors.
Yeah, but it's not all exactly,
Right.
yeah, it's not.
roughly-
Scott, it's cute with balconies and like walkways and things,
Yeah, sorry.
So if we don't have parking underneath, which is, I thought, something that was discussed,
Yeah.
we have parking just out.
Mm. Well, because you also would want parking for, if you do the hub, you're gonna want parking for your community space, which is also gonna be out.
And how many, if we have 70 spaces, what's the expectation from, say, number of vehicles?
Off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I don't remember. the answer
it
to that.
says it in there.
Does it? Okay, thank you.
It's 1.5 parking spaces per unit.
That sounds about right. Plus, the resource hub has a higher percentage of, like requires a higher percentage of parking per square foot. So in some ways, so then the question is like, are there shared? Like in sometimes you can do shared uses because you assume that like a certain percentage of people are gonna be away working during the day while other people are coming to the resource hub, so there's like, I think that's something that the developer would have to explore. I'm not gonna, like, I don't.
And then some people, maybe older people that don't drive anymore.
And,
Oh.
and like this one, it says, 61 spots ground floor. So that's why I was thinking it was,
Oh. Huh,
yeah,
I can double check that.
okay,
That sounds funny to me,
okay.
but it also could mean wrote those notes at a time that I was not entirely right, so I'll just apologize. That's what we were thinking, is that, but I do my PowerPoints a lot like late at night, really early in the morning.
The option would have had an underground with 2 levels.
Did Jordan bring this to you? I gave you one of these to show.
That probably will not need to.
What source centers?
But
One off.
But it is, I mean, it's depending on, I mean, and this could be something that like, there may be some developers who'd be like, if you have your 3-story structure, you would still, but you could tuck under some of the parking. But that's where, like, that's also where I think it really matters when you say how many units you want to, because it really, like, all these, every single factor changes the dynamic to some degree and also changes how the project looks in the end. So like, you know, like that's the part that's hard. And so like where I'm like, oh, the more flexibility we allow for. Because you're not signing a lease like tomorrow.
And I continue to see what developers come up with, because maybe it's not, we haven't even thought of yet.
Oh, yeah.
And again, it's hard to visualize it.
With computers and AI, they could give us
Yeah.
renditions of all of this in so many different ways.
You can, except for the fact that what I've been really careful of is the information that gets fed into AI, while it will produce something that's very beautiful, it'll key on to like what's out in the market as market housing, even if you say affordable, I think. And like, I just be really cautious of that
Well, I'm
because
not gonna be doing it.
I don't know, but I mean, I'm saying if any, like, because like Hannah and I talked about this a little bit, because, and the other thing is what I want to be careful about is I was involved in graphic design for a number of years and a whole bunch of other things. People get so wed to the thing they saw, and then they're never happy with the final thing that they get. And so like, there's a piece where the idea of like, oh, we like these things, we'd like it to be mission style, we'd like it to be this, or we'd like it to be that, you know, like those things all make sense. But as soon as you start drawing like, well, it's gonna have these exact balconies, then all of a sudden somebody can't build it without that thing. I will just tell you, I had a conversation with another congregation recently. I'm not gonna name them. And it was very funny. And I said, okay, I said, we're gonna do massing studies. They're not gonna have all the design features on them. They're gonna be like Lego blocks. I said, and one thing that I need you to know is if the Lego blocks are a color you don't like, that's not a reason not to do the project. I said, because here's the thing, color is so subjective. If you love green and you hate green, like you might go, I'm never building that thing because it's gonna be green. And you're like, I'm only building that thing if it's gonna be green. And like, and the director was so funny because I used brown as the color. And they were like, I hate brown. And I was like, thank you for proving my point. I mean, and honestly, because it really is, like, it's so subjective.
I get that.
So I'm gonna be as boring as possible, personal as possible. Does that help?
Timeless and something we can live with for 100 years.
Oh, of course,
Trendy.
of course, yeah. Yeah, and like, you're not gonna build what they're building at St. Luke's because it wouldn't fit.
Yeah.
If you look at affordable housing on the East Coast, it looks different because it's a different place with different weather. So, I mean, that's, you know, we can all talk, you know, but I mean, talk about like the style that you like. I think generally that's good. You know, rustic mission, you know, that kind of, you know, kind of thing. We like open and green space, but not like, oh my God, the path has to be exactly here. Then you get in trouble.
Yeah, that's OCD people.
Yeah. As somebody who goes around straightening people's pictures in their homes, I'm not gonna comment.
I
I'm just saying.
spoke out of honesty about my own self.
All right, fair enough. Scott, you were asking. So the other thing to be mindful of for a lot of folks, this is like, oh gosh, this is tiny. Right?
Yeah.
This is a small place.
So.
And we're not asking any of you to move in. there are plenty of people who would be grateful to have that, just a roof over their heads.
That's my.
I'm putting that up, and it's really interesting because it actually came up in San Diego City Council when they were talking about things the other day, and somebody's like, "Yeah, we can't do this. It's just too small." And then he's like, and the city council person was kind of like, in reality, there are a lot of folks who would be so grateful to have a unit that was 250 square.
Right.
Like 650 square feet is actually not too bad.
No,
Now you get to 950.
That's working, the kitchen that's working, it's like.
The people that see that in that view of that's ridiculously small, they are entitled people. Unfortunately, we have a lot of those in our country.
And I think the thing is, we're used to it, and we're encouraged to grow bigger, and I'm not gonna knock anybody who has a lot. The flip side is that, like, you don't necessarily need it, and you can go to other countries and you can see that people survive on a lot less. And so if we know that, it's not necessarily we're not causing anybody harm or, asking them to take on anything pain. A lot of times just having a clean place, clean, friendly place to live makes all the difference.
Or 1920.
Unit, so you have three.
Two bedroom, 450 square feet. Four. I
Yeah.
think that's right. The living room was our dining room.
Because then you could have
Our
a
bedroom, it's our living office.
Yeah.
but you can't have it.
Yeah.
If you try to, we just, ramming like 9 people.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
That's what Robert mentions.
Yeah, that's not.
Their house is
Yeah, I mean,
kitchen, dining room, and
Yeah.
then 3 bedrooms.
Your husband's parents?
I'm involved in
Where do they live?
a project right now, and it's actually really interesting.
It's less to clean, that's for sure.
But we lay our word, clutter.
Yeah, yeah,
There's room for clutter.
right.
I can explain, but basically, they were
It's a
part of the
big
GEM program,
It's more than.
in terms of like the
What
income.
about Ellie, who's
But
living
now it's just
couch surfing with her 3 kids?
actually to conform
She
to
would
the
be
income
grateful
limits.
for
And so like, now it's like, easier how to
650, yeah.
responsibly help people relocate.
That's a tough one.
I'm not, but like, once again, that's a problem because that's something else I'm involved in. That's not something that would be your problem that you're gonna take on. I'm just saying, and it's a legacy thing from decades ago, sorry. It started before the current situation. So, anyways, so just in terms of thinking about what, some of the factors that might affect building here. Obviously, this one is a big one right now. So,
It's always, so.
yeah,
Especially 7-4.
yeah.
Undulate.
So are there particular, like, as you think about this, are there particular scenarios that are better positioned to support what you want to do? How do you want to be thinking about that? And like, I think really it's just a question of like, where do you, like, how do you get to a point where you're comfortable making a decision while still leaving things open, I think, to some degree? Because the things that you don't know right now, is you still don't know exactly what a developer is gonna propose.
Right.
And because of that, you don't really know what income it's gonna bring in.
Can we say no if we don't like it?
Yeah.
I mean, we can.
Yeah.
We're not saying anything until we sign an agreement.
Yeah. I mean, what I would say is, like, if you say, like, for example, if you said to me, like, I'm just gonna use a higher number.
Yes.
Okay, if you said to me tonight, we're good with 70 units, and we're blanking, good with 70 units, right? Then if all of a sudden, like, we got close to making a deal, which you would be aware of all the negotiations that were going on, would be part of that conversation. Like, if then at that point, you've had the vestry signed off and said, we're comfortable with this. And the proposals come back in a way that's like reasonable, I think is the other piece of that. That if you would then go, oh, well, we completely changed our mind and now we're okay with 10. We never even had a conversation about that. I'm just gonna be really honest. But if you said to me,
we don't really know, because we don't really have enough information tonight. We could hold on to that idea of maybe up to, but we also know that there may be reasons that that might not pan out exactly, but we still want to see what we could get. Because like, to me, the big question for you all is, you have. Developers typically want to build, I don't say as much as possible, but as much as possible that's feasible within all of the factors in construction, right? So they want maximum flexibility. Right? You want maximum control. These are two things that kind of create tension, right? But you want to get to a point where you understand what your top dollar is. Because if you start going, well, we're gonna take away this, and we're gonna take away this, and we're gonna require this, and all of a sudden, you might not know how close you got to meeting the number you need to hit. That's why that.
Quick question for you, for the other projects, what is the projected income for the church?
The projected income, so for safety, it's $100,000 a year. For,
How many units are there?
there's somebody,
So, okay.
yeah.
And those.
I'm guessing it's probably about the same amenity. But it's different. Yeah. Yeah. But it's different property, it's different, yeah.
So if Menifee doesn't have an existing church? Correct. Oh, so they're just, diocese owns land there.
And church.
And oh, there's no worshiping community.
Oh, there's anonymous.
I see. Oh, okay.
Oh, we'd like it to be an Episcopal community, of course. Yeah. So this is one of the, so I so this is one of the downsides of being on the earlier stages of these things. We don't have, it's not like I've done the 10 churches that I have on the state, right?
Right.
And of course, we're doing this at a time when, you know, things like tariffs, like, you know, making my head hurt. So like, that's, I'm a little hesitant until they have got some numbers because like, I think we all know the market's changing.
Yeah.
How much land do we own across the street?
A sliver.
Well,
It's.
okay, so I contacted a realtor and asked to the park and and when she said that I can make it all, just plus this here. So it's interesting.
Really?
You know, it's right.
Yeah.
But it's more just right. And I think that's what's not. But it just all the parts.
It doesn't look like
You're gonna see this one, so that's the question.
we're paying taxes on it.
Are you?
Yeah, it's the only one that pencils out a different sequence than the rest.
Will you send me? Because, so the reason, so basically, when I looked it up and like, one of the parcel things, it doesn't, it's not listed the same way the rest of the parcels in the diocese.
Oh, because what I'm saying is all the ones that I pay, the parcel numbers are sequential. And then there's the weird one. There's one weird one that's like, it's like $20.
Yeah, it's a sliver.
Yeah, so you know it's small and it's, you know, it's.
Maybe we must create fairy shrimp. We have to protect the fairy shrimp. That's right. Maybe we could put them on that. That's why that one is.
I'm pulling a fairy shafts for me.
I think guys, 12 it goes 48. Aldi.
Okay.
Because they have the right mitigation or something, so they, yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, elsewhere, okay, we all got to pray that the fair shrimp are not here.
Well, I'm gonna hire some fairy dogs who like fairy shrimp. Look, we got, I have no problem.
Fairy shrimp barbecue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the level of study that we've done yet, so I can only, I can only control what I can control. But
And then we'll have some regulations dropped in like flies, and I don't think we're gonna have a problem.
So
The whole bureaucracy is getting destroyed. And there's not gonna be anybody left to even complain about it. So. Sorry, I'm getting political.
That's okay. Yeah, I heard lots today about doing that.
you're not gonna go.
somebody did have an idea, and I think it was too, or somebody, And I know somebody made a comment earlier, if selling the land, you don't know who you're going to get, but if you could sell that piece of property, and maybe you can ask control over just type of a real estate exchange with another group, get more land and be able to build more homes.
Two things. One, anything we didn't own before January 2024, the law was not apply. So you have to make sure the land was in your possession prior. Secondly, I would say that there are a lot of places right now that are, like a lot of dioceses now that are on land consolidating churches. Ours was not one of them, and the bishop is really like, I don't mean to be like a stickler, but like, because we had situations that prior to us all being here, and prior decades, prior times, churches have sold property, and it has not. And the idea is always like, oh, it will produce endowment, it will save us from whatever the thing is, and it almost never does. It almost means that the land, it almost always means that the first moment there's a crisis, dollars go away, and you end up back in the same situation.
Right.
So, I'm just putting it out there, it's very like honest.
Fair. I don't know, at what point do we go through all this and say, our minimum acceptable level of income is what? 40,000, 50,000?
I don't know. I mean, I feel
Because this would be a massive project. I'm just trying to figure out a way, how can you do something and help as many people as you're wanting, as we want to? But also not make this, you know, we're making 20 grand a year.
Totally. I mean, I think that's.
Because somebody may come in and say, that'd be great if you could build 96 homes, but it's never going to happen, and here's why. And we end up with 40. And then we end up with 20 grand, which doesn't get.
Right. So that, so to your point, like, that, those three criteria that I will state up front, advanced administrative, respond to community needs, ensure your financial sustainability. We're not going to be asking you to do something, and we're going to actively encourage you not to do things
Right.
that don't go a decent way toward making your needs whole. We can't always guarantee you're gonna get 100% of what you need. Because quite frankly, you have a lot of land and a lot of other churches do. And like, I am not going to be able to make them independently whole for projects, but it can help. So like, so is that helpful? Like, we want this to be something that works, that catalyzes what you're trying to do, that allows you to have a full time record. Like, those are all goals. And it's why we would be like, if you were to be like, oh, we're only comfortable with this and it only produces $20,000, like, so what are you gonna do when that doesn't work? It's gonna be like, what is doing? I don't mean that to be mean, no, it's just, it's kind of like, you know, if you were, you know, if you're in your own, what are you gonna do? Oh, okay.
It's not 15.
So what if you, so I don't want to, like, I realize you've got, like, you've got Sunday, other conversations, so what else do we need to know? Number one, and number two, like, if you had to make a choice today, what options would you be willing to entertain? And recognizing that you're not silent. In terms of, and I say options you're willing to entertain, like, would be okay to use some of this for X number of weeks, right?
Yeah.
Or we want to know the difference between X and Y.
That's a good, yeah. I think right now it's so theoretical that it's hard to for me to.
Speakers, what's the maximum amount that you can put on that piece of land without making a big problem? I mean, I don't know what our neighbors will say or what they can do to work with, but
The second part is not as much, and I'm suggesting you don't be good neighbors. I think how you do it and when you do it is important. Because like, just like, you know, if you're selling your own, home, right? Like, I mean, I'm just trying to think about it. Like, you have a fiduciary care to the church.
We put this on the community forum.
Yeah.
We put it on something. So, but I'm just curious, have you had problems with any of the projects and surrounding?
I mean, we haven't been, like, we're at the same stage with a lot of different things, and St. Louis is interesting, so I would say, I was on the plan when the St. Louis project started, but was not on it when it got approved. I have a lot of neighbors who are not particularly a fan of the St. Louis project because I was saying, because, you know, it ruins their sunset. I have one neighbor, and I'm just like, but there's reality, but I'm just gonna be real blunt here. There's reality where like, the church needs to be able to do that, both for its parishioners and for its financial sustainability, and it's like the best, you know, and then the question is, how do we invite people into the process? What I will say that's different than what I was, that one of the things that happened in St. Louis that I think we wanted to differently here. Because of the way they went through the process, you know, calling about bids and everything, and like, this isn't bad, I think it's just a lessons learned, so I just want to be really clear. That part of going with a developer that is, you know, like choosing your developer and how they choose to develop and how they do communication. Right. It can be important. It's maybe not as important everywhere. You know, like not everybody feels that way, but I think like it probably, you know, and I think in the end, I don't know whether Colin is fully aware about like, the differences. It's just a thing.
Yeah, because he said today that their developer did not want to do community engagement. And just wanted to rely on the fact that they could do it under SB4, so they didn't do community engagement, and some people only learned about the project when they looked up and they saw it being built. You know?
I also want to be really clear, if that's make the development bad, they're actually really, I just want to, I want to be, because they make me really, really good on a lot of things. It's, they operate under a different model, so you have to understand if certain things are important to you, you have to choose the model.
I think a lot of it up here,
Because, I mean, they've been quite great, actually, in many ways, you know?
Yeah.
It's just that they're not set up to do that
Yeah.
because of the types of projects that they do, so it makes it.
I think it's gonna be the way that it will be publicized up here and that, and the way that it will be presented when it comes to that is gonna make a huge difference. Because, you know, we are a small town.
Yeah.
And if people start going, oh, they're putting in homeless shelter over there, you know, it's gonna depend a lot of how it's presented. We have. I think absolutely we need to, knowing, you know, this community is, I think that, yeah, we will need to.
The budget individualism of the spirit of Ramona, you know, people like to have a say.
Absolutely. Isn't there a rumor that they're across from us, they're gonna be developing that, so.
Tell them about that, Jessica.
So I started to do research on what was going on, what was being built in town, what was being proposed. And came across, now, still, as far as I know, in escrow, I did not have a chance to call after my conversation with you yesterday. But, that
The
20-acre parcel over there.
Corner.
Do you know about it? Oh, you said like you knew what was gonna be there. Oh,
No, but I'm not surprised that.
so what I understand is on that 20 acres, there's a proposal for 230 homes for 20 acres. Which actually isn't, I mean, if you think about the
community across the street. I mean, it's more space than that, but not significantly. Yeah, thank you for, I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so I mean, so I think the other thing to know is that like, as much as like the character of the community as it's been, and like the character of the community is going to be, and where you're located, the likelihood that it's going to change over time. The other thing that I have to say is you're also pretty close to the fire department, which is a really good thing in this day and time. Really just putting it out there. I mean, I realize it's something you all think about. I don't because I live where I live, but you know, I do think that really matters.
And public transportation.
Yeah.
I mean, we have like an year like a secondary, yeah.
Comes out of our cuts about this.
Well, that's been all I can wrap my brain around is.
But what about Jessica's question? Like, if we, why don't we all take a sticky note and write on the paper our answer and hand it along and something like that?
It's so, what, how many units would be a footprint, like, what was it? Like, something like that.
The price of those, if you had people signed today,